What if I told you some secrets aren't buried because they're forgotten? They're buried because they're still active. Because once you see them, once you understand what they imply, the world doesn't just look different, it feels different. For decades, we've been told that the truth about UFOs would come out eventually, that disclosure would arrive neatly through documents and hearings and official statements. But history doesn't work that way. Real truths don't arrive clean. They arrive fragmented, out of order, through whispers, contradictions, and things that were never meant to surface. And sometimes they begin long before we're told they do. In April of 1941, 6 years before Roswell, something fell from the sky near Cape Girardeau, Missouri. This wasn't wartime hysteria. The United States hadn't even entered World War II yet. According to the multiple accounts, local police and fire crews were called to the scene. What they found wasn't debris. It was described as a craft, and nearby, bodies, not human. The military arrived quickly, unusually quickly, and took control of the site. Witnesses were told not to speak. Photographs were confiscated, and one image in particular would become legend. A photo allegedly showing a small non-human body laid out on the ground, witnessed privately, passed quietly, and then erased. No official report, no archive, no denial, just silence. For years, Cape Girardeau was dismissed as a folklore, an isolated story, a regional rumor. But history doesn't repeat itself by accident. When similar crashes began appearing years later, with the same military response, the same information locked down, the same missing evidence, coincidence stops being a reasonable explanation. Patterns form, and patterns imply structure. By the late 1940s, the United States faced a problem it wasn't prepared to admit. Something unknown was entering controlled airspace, and conventional explanations weren't working. That's when Majestic 12 allegedly formed. Not a research group, not as a scientific body, but as a containment authority, operating outside of public oversight, outside normal military command, above elected government. Their task wasn't discovery, it was damage control. Because knowledge is power, and uncontrolled knowledge destabilizes systems. Because documents can be forged, testimonies can be questioned, radar data can be explained away, but photographs end debates. They don't argue, they don't persuade, they simply exist. Which makes the disappearance of the Cape Girardeau photograph more telling than its existence ever could be. If it didn't matter, it wouldn't have vanished. But here's the thing, acknowledging non-human intelligence in 1941 wouldn't have just changed military history. It would collapse religious framework, political authority, technological hierarchies, and humanity's perceived places in the universe. A world on the brink of global war couldn't survive that revelation. So the truth wasn't destroyed. It was managed, deferred, fragmented, buried beneath classification and time. Today we hear a new language, unidentified aerial phenomena, non-human intelligence, unknown origin. But notice what's still missing. No bodies, no aircrafts, no early photographs. The past remains sealed, not because it lacks evidence, but because it was handled too early. Maybe that feeling you get when you hear stories like Cape Girardeau isn't curiosity. Maybe it's recognition. Because the truth didn't disappear. It fractured. And fragments have a way of surfacing. Not when we demand them, but when we're finally ready to understand them. Some photographs aren't lost, they're waiting. Waiting for the moment when the truth they reveal can no longer be contained by silence alone. And that brings us back to Majestic 12, because Majestic 12 was never meant to explain what was found. It was meant to decide who would be allowed to know. According to the documents and testimony that surfaced decades later, Majestic 12 wasn't a research group in the traditional sense. It wasn't made to ask questions. It was created to manage a reality that arrived too early. Too early for the public, too early for science, too early for a world already on the edge of collapse. If incidents like Cape Girardeau were real, if recovered crafts and non-human bodies existed before World War II, then Majestic 12 wasn't responding to Roswell. Roswell was just a moment the secret nearly slipped. Majestic 12 would have existed to ensure that never happened again. To control evidence, to remove photographs, to secure materials, and most importantly, to keep the narrative stable. Because once the idea of non-human intelligence becomes undeniable, authority shifts. Governments lose their monopoly on power. History has to be rewritten, and humanity is forced to confront the possibility that we were never alone and never fully in control. So maybe Majestic 12 wasn't about discovery at all. Maybe it was about containment. And maybe the reason we still argue about photographs, documents, and whispers from the past isn't because the evidence is weak, but because the system designed to bury it was too effective. Majestic 12 may no longer exist in name, but if it ever did exist, its mission may never have ended. Some photographs aren't lost, they're waiting, and so is the truth. And sometimes in the age of deception, the truth isn't always what we think it is. What do you believe? Let us know in the comments.